Okay, so we're going to go into part two, which is more on retention. This is more customer experience. This part's actually a bit shorter, so it won't take as much time as we did last time. So we'll have Q&A as well available. So as I mentioned, it really depends on what's riding on it to see how important retention is. And if you don't already know this, statistically, then it's 5x more expensive to go out and get a new customer than it is to retain the customers that you just brought on. So a few things, the challenge we were having is we had started to grow, and we had a few different challenges around the technology, the reliability, the support, things like that. And so it was all over the place, and it was hard to identify how to deal with this problem. And there's a couple of books I was reading about experience and customer experience. So we actually set up a department, a team specifically for customer experience. And there's a couple of important factors here. Is you want to make sure that this is a cross-functional acting team. It doesn't just sit in one area. It needs to have span across the entire organization, and it also needs to have the authority. So I was the general manager for the company. I had that person reporting directly to me for almost a year before I had them fall into the proper department, just so people understood. One was the customer needed to know that they had a direct line all the way up to management, and also within the organization, this person could make the changes and suggestions quickly and efficiently. One of the key elements, so when you talk about customer support and customer service, a lot of people talk about the Ritz-Carlton experience and delighting your customer. And I read this book where it said, what if all this time, bless you, what if all this time we thought that delighting was the way to go when it's actually not the right thing? And if you think about how sustainable is it for you to keep delighting your customer? It's not. What is sustainable is to make your customers enjoy and want to do business with you by doing something, making their experience more seamless. So we focused on being a seamless experience and simple experience. So if you think just with everyone's use of mobile apps and banking, right, is do you want to go to the banks now, or do you want to just be able to do it on your phone? And how often do you get frustrated if it's not easy for you to deposit a check or withdraw money, right? It needs to be a seamless process. And then one of the key things that you want to do is make sure that this person or this team is very organized and very good about following up, because that's the key. Is if you make a promise to the customer, this person or this team needs to make sure that they are going to follow up and close the loop on everything. So even if someone else commits in the organization, this person has to be behind the scenes, making sure that that person did their job, and they get back to the customer and get the feedback directly from the customer as well. And they want to evaluate every single touch point that a customer has. So I got a couple of business cards. That's a touch point. That's an impression that someone gets when they look at your organization. And so you'll notice on my business card, the weight of it is quite thick and heavy, because we want to give off a little bit more of an elevated, a substantial organization. And then you also want to take a look at your phone greeting. So if someone calls you on the phone, how do you answer the phones? There's an organization called Ruby, I think, and it does answering services for you. And they say they do it with a smile. So if someone's talking to you and smiling through the phone, that actually is going to make a difference versus someone that just picks up the phone and they're trying to get the person off the phone as quick as they can. The website is another touch point. When you're signing up, it's another touch point. I talk about something called pre-click and post-click experience. So pre-click is I see some action I'm going to take, and as a user or as your customer, I'm expecting something is going to happen when I do this. And once I click, what happens? Does that expectation match what I was expecting? And that can sometimes be even on a banner ad. If I was clicking something and Google penalizes you if you don't match the content and things like that, but that's just an example of why it's important to match expectations for your customers. This slide I on purpose made it, you can't really see it, but what I'm trying to show here is that there's so many different touch points, and one of the things you want to do is look at your buyer journey. You probably have heard this term quite a bit, the customer journey, the buyer journey, and what's important about it is that it's not linear. It actually can go around in circles and loops and back and forth because customers are not really going through stage by stage the way that you had planned them to learn about your company. They're talking to friends, they're getting referrals from peers, they're going to different sites, they're coming across stuff. Maybe they had a great idea and they wanted to pursue it, and then 3 weeks of vacation, or they go on vacation and they forget about it, and then it's 6 weeks later and they revisit it. So it's not going to be linear, and it's not going to be in the time frame that you expect it to be or want it to be. So you have to be prepared for that and be able to engage people. And a great way to do that is to map out what your buyer journey is. And a way to do that is to look at the personas of the types of buyers and customers that you have and say, okay, well, this is a female, she's between age 34 and 38. She has, kids that are going into lower grade school, and she's working, and that's one persona. Then you have another persona, which is maybe someone that's 50 to 80, 50 to 70 years old, and they're in a different life stage, and they're going to approach things a little bit differently. You want to know about these things so that you can really cater, going back to, that crossing the chasm in the niche. You want to really think about each of your customers and segment and personalize. That's where you're going to get the higher engagement. You're going to get the loyalty that way too. We kind of touched on this a little bit in terms of what you're talking about in terms of a emotional connection with a user versus a functional connection. So you're on the stage and you're telling people about your product and you're trying to say you're the best, and that soapbox is an old style of doing things. So you have to shift to the perspective of your audience and see what they see, and that's very difficult. So it's always good, as I was mentioning earlier, is go out and go find people and get feedback directly from people yourself. Don't rely on just reading stuff or emails or information. It's very dynamic to be able to get this feedback real time, ask questions, and learn about it. So everything means looking at all those different touch points. And then we talked about the pre-click and post-click as well. And then I do have this piece on here about a positive, memorable experience. So when you came in here, I had these little snacks here because I wanted to make sure you don't feel too hungry, and it gives you hopefully a little bit of a positive, memorable experience versus other sessions you've been at. And so you want to think about how you end something. If you go to a show and it's the most amazing show and you have a very good time, and then as you're leaving, you run into the usher and they say something very obnoxious to you, or they, you have a bad experience with them, all of a sudden it taints the entire experience you had at the show just because of this one touch point, and it was at the end. So you want to try to, of course, have a very good experience, but at the end of that experience, you want to see how you can make a positive, memorable experience for them as well, and that's how they'll remember you, that's how they'll talk about you with other people as well. So it's like something unexpected. And I'm going to talk about that toward the end as well. From a customer service perspective, one of the things is to, again, reduce this friction. So there's obviously a shift in the way that people are used to getting support. Whether they call, whether they email, they open a ticket online. You want to really be trying to provide self-service. So this goes back to those how-to videos we were talking about. The thing about videos, or the thing about any of this content, is you start small and eventually it's going to build up, and you don't feel overwhelmed by the amount of volume that you have to create if you just start small. So self-service is a key piece. Obviously you want to respond quickly, whether it's a lead and you want to respond within 5 minutes so that your competitor doesn't, or it's just a customer support question. And then channel switching costs. So there's this concept of disloyalty. So as someone has an issue with your product or with your service and they have to try to solve it, they may go and try self-service, or they may engage a chatbot, or they may engage a live person chat. If they have to switch channels, going from one medium to another medium, and then they have to get on a phone call, like if you're calling your mobile carrier, right, and they make you wait for a while, then they transfer you and say, well, that's not my department, that's someone else's department. Every time you switch, you actually get disloyalty. And the more disloyalty you create, eventually it's going to snap and they're going to leave you. So it's key to always be looking at these things as well. In terms of keeping people engaged, so you may have heard the term NPS, Net Promoter Score. This is something that obviously is good. It's quick and easy to do and figure out who are the people that really love you and who are the people that are ready to leave you as well. One thing we did is, rather than sending out large surveys to people, is we did quarterly sentiment pulses. We actually extended this pulse not just to customers, but we also do it internally with employees for employee engagement as well. So we have a few different factors and criteria, and we just ask people to give us a number rating, and then we track that as a trend. So we're measuring our own performance over time, and that pulse just helps us stay on track to make sure we're doing the right things in different areas. So it's a little bit different from NPS, where it actually gives you a little bit more actionable, specific ways to do that. And then from a feedback perspective, the surveys are great, and online and automation is great, but going back to the CX department, we actually call every single one of our customers, or at least we attempt to reach out to every single customer once a quarter. And that's sometimes difficult getting a hold of people, but we try to talk specifically with the person on the phone, and we try to move up the chain. If for us it's B2B, so we try to speak with management, build a relationship, build rapport, so that it's not a surprise. Yep, question? NPS? NPS is Net Promoter Score. So what you do is you send out a survey, you say 1 through 10, how likely are you to refer us to a friend? Okay. And then the score you get gives you an ultimate score. So if you have a score of 50 or 60, that's okay, that's good. 65 is very good. If you're in the 20s or 30s, you're having a churn problem.
So when you say you try to call them once a quarter,
yep.
What percentage of the company will actually do that? Like how far does that span, or do you just have a specific team?
We have a department that's all they do. Yeah.
Okay.
We actually did. Do I have it here, or where do I have it? I think I have it on the next slide. So we try to do automation for emails, and then we try to get just reach out and keep touching them and making sure. So as the number of customers expands, that team has to grow. So this is from we call this win back, and this is under retention as well. So I was doing a experiment with, and this is LinkedIn. So I signed up for a service. When I canceled that trial, they send you, they're trying to be a little bit more personable, and they're giving me the little emoji as well. And then they're trying, in this case, they haven't given me an offer. I'm waiting for them to give me an offer to come back. But a lot of companies have started to do that now, is when you're trying to cancel a service, they will try, and at the bottom of this email, if you can't read it, it says, have you changed your mind? Here's how you can sign back up. And hopefully that's a seamless process where you just click it and it's done, versus having to re-enter all your information again. That would create a little bit of friction there. And this is just a little tip around churn. You definitely want to make sure your churn is below 10%. Otherwise, you should reevaluate your product as well. One of the things we've been doing around cancellation, and if you've ever tried with Sky or one of your services to cancel the programming, what they'll do is you'll call in and you'll say, I want to cancel, and they say, oh, okay, well, we're sorry to hear that. Let me transfer you to the specialist. And you get transferred to someone else that's their job, is to focus on cancellations, and they're going to do everything in their power to try to retain you. So that's one way that you can work on retention, is you have a specialist, because this person, you can really train them on kind of psychology of what you can say and how you can say things, and how you can evaluate a customer's quick information to be able to try to persuade them to stay, and how willing you are to kind of throw money back at the customer to get them to stay with you. What we had played around with was also, even though we tried to reduce friction across everything else, we actually increased friction for reducing services. That's a bit of a risky play, because you want to make sure you're talking with your customers and you're getting feedback directly from them. So we've done an experiment, but it's actually shown that we're actually able to show customers, because a lot of times they weren't getting the performance that they wanted from the product, and we've been able to show them how to use the product better, and now they keep it, or they actually add on to the product as well. And so kind of from a overall perspective around customer experience, so we had these different departments, we had a technical support department, we had a customer onboarding team, and then we had engineering as a team. And we actually, when we rolled out customer experience as a department, we actually changed the name of our departments. That sounds kind of silly, that it's going to do anything, but it changed the mindset within the organization, because now engineering is called customer solutions. The word customer is in their department's name. They have to think about the customer. They have to think about solutions for the customer. Customer success has to make sure that they're thinking about the success of the customer when they're onboarding these customers and making sure they have a good experience. And then technical support, customer support, they remember who they're serving, because customer support is usually complaints, and so you sometimes forget and you get frustrated with these customers, but you have to remember that they're paying your bills and paying everyone's salary. So with that, that is the retention piece of the session as well. And I do have just one little piece here on reading material. So I have a lot more books on this blog, on this link, but these are just a couple I thought were specific to here. Habit was an interesting book because it gets into behavioral sciences. It's not as heavy and academic. It's a good, quick read, and it just shows you the way that people think and what triggers you have. Another one, especially if you're in an app or a service, Hooked, shows you how Instagram gets people to come back every time, multiple times a day, and what they use from a psychology perspective. And then the experience economy was great because it really talks about the experience people want to have. Rather than buying things, they want to experience things. And that positive, memorable experience comes from there. And then Uncommon Service was the one that was talking about disloyalty and how to provide seamless support. So these are just a couple of them, but and I haven't updated this section yet, but I've broken it out by different subcategories as well, so you can take a look at that as well. So with that, any other questions? We can either talk about retention or we can talk about the growth as well.